First of all, I'd like to wish you a good morning, and I'd like to thank the director of the Center for Socio-Political Research for his invitation. It is my great pleasure to be presenting my work before researchers who are from the ranks of academia, who are theologists, sociologists, philosophers, who have much broader knowledge about these issues than me, but I come from a completely different work. I deal with the security issues. I come from the security school, and I study religions and religious relations in the context of security. Today, this morning, I'll be speaking about ethnic and religious violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, focusing on the post-Dayton period. As Minister Budimir has said. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. So, in a nutshell, just to repeat what the gentleman has said, I come from the security school, and I'll be looking at these issues through a completely different pair of spectacles. The security issues caused by religions and ethnic motives. So I'll also share with you a number of findings I came up with during my research. If you publish a paper on this topic in a reference journal, then you need to be ideologically correct, you see, nowadays, something that's contrary to science. If you start discussing these issues opening, if you talk about the level of hatred in Bosnia, what Ivo Andrić talked about, saying that Bosnia is a country of fear and hatred, and I think he's one of the best social psychologists who understood the ethnic and religious relations in Bosnia and Herzegovina, obviously through Bel Art. So if you are not ideologically correct, if you say anything like that, then these journals will tell you that you're full of hatred, that you have a wrong approach. But to digress, during the research, and also I defended the doctoral thesis 10 years ago in Belgrade. I visited Eastern Bosnia, and the visit took several days. I talked to the members of the Bosniak population. We visited different villages from Bratunac to Srebrenica. So in this section, in this small area, one person that accompanied me, and obviously we talked, he was my contact with the local community. He said, I'll stop the car here. And we stopped, and he said, do you see that hill? Yes, I do. There were trenches in the other war, the Second World War, he said. And there were trenches in the same war, the same front line, the same trenches. We just actually cleared them and to make them a bit wider, but not everywhere, just in some places. So this actually speaks about a level of hatred and interethnic tensions. To answer the question, what is happening in the post-Dayton period? How ethnic and religious ethnicity and religion-motivated violence happens? Generally, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you cannot possibly separate ethnos or ethnic from religion or religious, because the religious identity is the key determinant of the ethnic identity. As a rule, there is almost a 100% match. If not 100, then that percentage is very high. So it's really difficult to differentiate between the religiously motivated or inspired or ethnically inspired or based violence. But there is one specificity to Bosnia and Herzegovina. You see, we see such attacks of violence elsewhere in the world. A criminal specialists and lawyers use a different language. They say hate crimes. But we here focus on this aspect. However, what is characteristic here, but not just for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also elsewhere in Europe, Islamophobia is on the rise, anti-Semitism. Every society has problems of its own, with some expressions of hatred. But for Bosnia and Herzegovina, what is specific is the social context and the historical context, because Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country that's at a crossroads of different cultures. So we have three ethnic and religious groups with a history of violence, with an intermezzo during socialism for ideological reasons, under the pretext of unity and brotherhood. The then state would severely publish even the slightest expression of ethnicity or religion-based violence. But that was, what was manifest. But under the surface, the tensions and remained, and then we saw an eruption of violence in 1992. Just to go back to the historical context, let's go back to Bashar in 1992 to understand how the war started. The 1st of March and the killing of the best man in a wedding procession. And this is a paradigm of the hate crime, because you have a perpetrator and you have a victim. However, the perpetrator and the victim do not necessarily need to know one another, because this is not an attack on an individual basis. It's an attack against the group. An individual, as an individual, the personal identity, especially in this context, is not relevant at all. You see, what were the consequences? We cannot say that this is the cause of the war. It's not casus bellum, but it significantly affected interethnic relations and significantly expedited the security dynamics, as we call it, which resulted in a conflict, etc. Also, there is something else that should be noted here when it comes to these attacks. There are attacks on symbols. The man is a symbol. A person is a symbol because a person is a member of a community. And an attack against a person or individual also correlates with an attack on a community. And symbols have sociological meanings. Symbols unite people. For example, the cross unites Christians, or any other religious symbol will unite other members of that religious community. There is also an emotional aspect. You are affiliated with the religious community you belong to. This is your essence. This is your being. In axiological terms, it is something that's very valuable to you, something that you are ready to sacrifice a lot. And then someone attacks it. So these attacks, irrespective of the type of the attack, be it an attack that may seem to be benign, for example, an attack on a church or mosque, it does not matter. What matters are the consequences that have long-term effects on the communities that identify with the religious or ethnic group.
Now, to briefly reflect on the situation in BNH and how we can explain the situation here. See, this is not a conflict between two persons. This is basically a relation that the famous Louis Coser explained by saying that boundaries between different social groups are set through the vehicle of conflict. Why is there conflict? Because there is no consent about the distribution of power and privilege. And that is what we see in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Through history, we see different vistas on different things. The question of origin, the question of language, and that has a repercussion on the overall social structure. And see what happened yesterday by adoption of the resolution and the long genesis of these unresolved issues. And when I said that my pH value within my body has changed, I deal with science and I try to be as objective as possible, and that I should not import any value and judgment in it. But this whole environment in the international community reminded me of Orwell's 1984, and this number, 84 countries that support it, has a negative symbolic meaning in my mind. In other words, we are going back to the story of just distribution of rights, territories, who has a prerogative and who doesn't, and how by the violation of the constitution of BNH we came into this situation. So there is no consensus about important social issues, and like Mr. Budimir said, this will significantly hamper trust, and this will be a major setback in the reconciliation process. So why does it matter from the point of view of hate crime? Because during big social changes, when there is a lot of tension and antagonism, that is when there is an increase of these attacks. So the most volatile period was during the return of refugees and displaced people, and this assumes all three religious communities or confessions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Churches were attacked, cemeteries, mosques. So these mainly are related to violation of rights of returnees and material damage, graffiti, damaging, insulting messages on houses, sending the message that they are not welcome. It does have significant psychological consequences, and like I said, that I don't know how much time I have. Okay. In post-Dayton period, what is good is that the intensity and social danger stemming from these crimes slackened down significantly over time. There were significant incidents, disruptions of religious ceremonies with grievous bodily harms. What I'm talking about specifically is the opening of the Banja Luka Mosque Ferhadia in the year 2000. That is one of the events. So we can't say that it's only us, the Serbs, that are in jeopardy. No, the others too. And in the Federation also, Serbian returnees were exposed to attacks. Their cemeteries were being destroyed. And specifically, in my discussion with people during my field research, family moves out from a region because when there is Easter, there would be children from the other side throwing eggs on these. And people move to another territory, not only the living people there, but they also move their deceased from their cemeteries. And these messages are not heard, they are silent. And some circles especially are unwilling to hear these messages. They are deaf-tone, but they are a reality. Why religious attacks, and when do they happen? Especially during religious holidays. See, Nasser Orić did not attack the village of Kravice on the 4th of January, no. It was the 7th of January, our Christmas, because we also divide time as sacred and profane, and regardless of which community you belong to, when you try to have this transcendental connection, these attacks happen with such brutality and bestiality which leave deep, deep scars in the collective memory. And so these are things that cannot be erased, they cannot be forgotten, they have long-term consequences, and I repeat, when it comes to religion-motivated attacks, how can we determine that something is motivated by religion? By what the receiving end, the object of the attack is. If it is a cemetery, if it is a time, a specific time of the attack during a religious holiday. Now, if we analyze these trends, who does it and why? That is the key question. And comparative studies have shown that this does not happen just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it happens everywhere. And researchers did a certain classification of who does it. There are such groups as perpetrators. Here, they would be extremist groups belonging to, let's say, right-wing groups, neo-Nazis, inspired by certain radical ideologies or Islamic fundamentalism and so on. So that is one category. And when you analyze what their participation is in perpetrating these crimes in Bosnia and Herzegovina, from the findings that I have, and I've been observing it, it's not them actually. And if you look comparative experiences, you'll see that the results from other countries are pretty much the same. Secondly, there are juvenile perpetrators. We call them perpetrators for fun, for excitement.
Those are minors, or senior minors, 17, 16, who belong to certain subcultures and are exposed to different influences and commit attacks. A large number of attacks were committed by them. So what does it mean? They take a stone and throw it on a mosque or on a church. So why? Well, for the gist of it, they go to a cemetery and create a havoc there. The police arrests them, apprehends them, etc. So they fit the profile, you see. Another category, another group, are the so-called defenders or reactionaries, those who react, who are quite predominant, those who believe that their culture is at stake. So someone is trying to affect their culture. How? In Germany, for example, now we have migrants, they hate migrants, they attack migrants. Those are not necessarily neo-Nazi organizations. Or, for example, if we go back to our context during the time of return, so after 3 years and a half of war, returnees get back to their village and they are the victims of different attacks and pressures to leave their village again. You know, there are offensive graffitis, people shoot in the vicinity of their homes, their houses, windows get stoned, especially during religious holidays. In other words, as I've said, these lines between groups are created and drawn through conflict, and the intensity of the conflict will depend on the level or degree to which we agree or disagree on certain things. And also, whatever happens at the macro level is projected on the micro level. So there is no basic consensus about key societal issues. This will be, of course, projected downwards to the local level micro communities, exactly where those violent acts happens. The third group are revengers. So they express collective will. If there is an attack motivated by religious or ethnic reasons, they want to take vengeance, they want to revenge. So these would be the profiles of the classification. But let me give you an example. We had an example here in Banja Luka several years ago. Two boys were getting back from a pub. They were passing by the mosque. There was a hajjah, there was like a prayer. And they took a stone and threw it at the mosque, one of them saying, "You killed my father, now you are shouting here." The police actually apprehended the two of them. One of the boys actually apologized to the Islamic community, saying, "Sorry, I was under the influence," etc. But you see, lots of ugly things may happen in favorable social and political contexts. But these events could trigger other violence. This may not be the best example for these revengers, but it's generally difficult to identify the motive, who did what for what reason, because a large number of attacks have never been resolved. They are missionaries. That's the fourth category. So they've been appointed by the supreme power to defend the ethnic and religious identity of their ethnic group, and they are ready to do anything. They act alone. They have certain psychopathological characteristics and traits. For example, Muamer Topalović, who killed a Catholic family in 2002 near Konjic on Christmas Eve. And he killed 3 and wounded, afflicting grave injuries on the 4th member of the family. He did not know the family, but he felt the need to do so because of the injustice against the Muslims elsewhere in the world. And what was fascinating, actually frightening, he actually, having killed the family, went home and went to bed. And he said, I felt just a bit conscience-stricken, but he nevertheless went to sleep. Now, let's see how we can predict the developments. Generally, we can say that in post-Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina, there has been no major violence inspired or motivated by religion or ethnic affiliation. We saw many more during the war, obviously, but how things are going to develop from now on will depend on the macro level. The legitimacy, which is the key intervening variable, meaning whether certain animosity will erupt into a wider conflict. The fact is that in the ambient of security science, we have not seen a high intensity violence, but this does affect the stability. Hatred is specific, you see. It is latent, it is not visible, and in the right context, given the right conditions, it explodes. Ivo Andrić said it in his novel Mademoiselle. Well, to paraphrase, in certain moments of time, when laws and mind are abolished, the mob that is known for the kind word and speech, so sincerity, that's what he's talking about, explodes in the hatred that they could not express before. And he says sometimes it takes a century for them to be silent, only to erupt. So this is a very serious issue. And we need to research it, we need to monitor the situation, and we need to condemn any act of violence. So all 3 parties involved here should actually distance themselves from the perpetrator, clearly saying that the crime was committed on an individual behalf, not on behalf of a group, because every stone thrown on a temple contributes to the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which still exists, unfortunately.